Welcome everybody to the show. We are slightly disorganized here because Chrome just crashed on me while the music was playing. So I'd like to welcome everybody to Counter Clipping show number 159 for February 5th. It is the 5th, right? 2024. There's a whole bunch of stuff for us to talk about this evening. So let's put the banner up. And I guess I didn't remember to give a shout out to Thomas Bandy for stepping up to the swordsman level on the Patreon. So thank you, Thomas. So everything else is going great. We had a pretty successful, I think, weekend at the San Diego HistCon Winter Quarters event. So hopefully lots of folks were able to participate in that. There were some really good panels and some really interesting games, very little of which I got to see because I had stuff happening this weekend. But we did host the opening and closing ceremonies, as it were, with Harold and a number of esteemed guests, including Voco and John Butterfield and Mark Herman, and some other folks. So thanks to all of those folks. So before we get started tonight, let me give everybody a reminder to thumbs up the video if you haven't done so already. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That is one way to support the channel, and just being here is another way. If you'd like to do more, there's a bunch of links to do that in the video description. So check those out, including the Patreon and the merch store and the Ko-Fi and the brand new, not brand new anymore, but, you know, new-ish, Noble Knight affiliate link. Hopefully I will be able to give you an update on the road to, or the campaign for North Africa sometime pretty soon, but I do not have new numbers tonight. So thank you very much for those who have used that affiliate link already. And I guess I'll mention that Super Chats and Super Stickers are on for those who want to get their comment highlighted. I am guaranteed to respond to it in some vaguely satisfactory way. If you do put it in a Super Chat or Super Sticker, I won't miss it that way. Might not get to it instantly, but I will get to it at some point. So also shout out to Mr. Stigler, who I got a care package from today containing some DVDs of The Wire, which I guess I have to commit myself to finally watching. Are my t-shirts $34? They shouldn't be. Might have to check that. I haven't looked at that in a long time, actually. So the Harsh Rules is generally an outstanding channel, Mark McNair. So before we get into the weeds here, we are clipping, once again, Norman Conquests. We will easily finish this evening, and we are good. That screen did not crash. And we are drinking Basil Hayden's, which we will assuredly not finish this evening, but, you know, it's fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. So, anyway. So, before moving on, 137 people watching already. Let's say hello to, let's put this over here, Aaron Dennis, Alan Salazar, Beatia Atkins, welcome to the show. Hopefully I didn't mangle that too badly. Bob Kowalczyk, Chad Kennedy, Charles Latorre, Chet Bell, Daniel McCord, Dirk Plexiglass, A4 Airman from sunny Southern Ohio, Egret, Eric Goebel, Eric Hansen, Gronyard, Rich, HUN644, New Iggy Crichtel, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jason Williams, Jeff Beeler, Joe Okabayashi, John Longshore is in the house, Kyle Harris, Lee Grant Manders, Mark McNair, Mark Dennehy, Marty Sample is here, Meandering Mike, Michael Simon, Miles Miles Righty, something like that. Miles, welcome to the show. Molotov, Cockatiel Games, Panzer Division, Lair, Perfidious Albion, Perry Sparopoulos, Rick Cox, Rob Johnson, Ryan Huard, from the place where Sinestro comes from. Stacking Limits, Steve, the NPC, Stigler is here. Once again, thanks, Stigler. The Command Tent, Tim Zales, Tony Mammal, Vicky, welcome back to the show. Vince Ree and Wolf Dog, welcome everybody to the show. So we're going to talk about, and I have a reason for this topic, and we will explore that reason as we go. But I'm going to talk about some other stuff first. The topic is games we love and why they suck. And the idea here is to kind of explore what makes a game, because every game has flaws, right? what makes a game's flaws worth putting up with, I suppose, is kind of the sense of it. Thank you so much, Mr. Dennis. very much. Hopefully, I will actually get the chance to go to an SD-HistCon one of these days. So there's that. I did watch the first episode of The Wire many years ago now, and didn't get past it. But I am given to understand that it is a slow burn start, and certainly the Babylon 5 experience would ought to make me comfortable with a show that does most of its scene setting legwork in season 1, right? So anyway, apparently the new season of True Detective's pretty good, by the way. Haven't watched any of it yet. I have thoughts about True Detective, which maybe we'll get to later, but maybe not. So anyway, I guess I will start with Winterfest, which is coming up in less than 2 weeks now, and due to family issues, one of our 4 World in Flames players will not be able to attend. We kind of, sort of, we're hoping to have 5. We kind of, sort of, now have 3, and it is our feeling that World in Flames, while viable with 3 players, will move too slowly for a convention format with 3 players. So instead of World in Flames, we will be playing great campaigns of the American Civil War. I'm not sure what that'll be yet exactly. Hopefully we'll have that ironed out this week, because I'm in the middle of now cranking out all kinds of fancy things. One of the things that hasn't... we're probably due for like a, wargame enhancements type of topic at some point. Game plans in flames. This is exactly right. Oh, this is great. This is fantastic. I have this. This is phenomenal, by the way. This is one of those, Michael Simon, I guess I'll throw this out. Season 1 of True Detective is so good that it was not possible for follow-on seasons to seem equal to it. So thus the general disappointment of season 2, which I thought was still good. It was like a police show that I actually watched. That's not normally the kind of thing that I watch. But it wasn't nearly as good as the first one. That was the problem. The 3rd season was really good. Maybe still not quite as good as season 1, but it was much better. So anyway, let's see here. Oh, okay. Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp. The full title is a mouthful. I'm going to call it The Enemy at the Gates. It looks very nice. I saw I'm not sure if it was a prototype or what. And it wasn't this past Compass Expo. I think it was the one before. Or maybe it was on the Facebook group. I'm not sure. And the one I'm thinking of is the Balkan one. But it's a nice looking game. And I think the CSS system is solid. It just needed a little bit of time to grow into itself, as it were. Tony Mammal, I suspect that you might end up getting disappointed with that show at some point. Where exactly is a good question. The Molotov Cocktail, they all do. I don't know about season 2, but I guess they circle back to some of that in season 4. So, but you're thinking of season 1. So anyway, I haven't watched any of these things. I have to be honest. I feel like this is like an entire industry at this point, and I have thoughts about this too that I probably haven't taken the time to try to articulate, so I'm not going to try to do so. So, very interesting. Battle Over Britain. McFudpucker, do you mean the John Butterfield Battle Over Britain that was released by TSR back in the day? I have that. I haven't played it. I think John's... I thought I asked John about this in an interview, and I think he was somewhat disappointed with it, but... in retrospect, and certainly RAF is I think where more people will find that palatable. Let me put it that way. Plus, it's hard to get any Spitzer game. Ooh, very nice. This is a pretty interesting film. This is one of the really rather rare Western films about the East Front of World War II. The other one that folks will know about is Enemy at the Gates with Jude Law and Ed Harris and whoever else was in it. And Ron Perlman and Rachel Weisz, as I recall. Which is not a bad movie. It's pretty pretty fictionalized, but that's fine. Our Cross of Iron's pretty cool though. That's a pretty cool movie. Sam Peckinpah classic. So the train was too expensive. Anyway, so the idea here is so I guess let me get all the intro stuff out of the way. So the next thing we have coming up is Winterfest. We will do at least one show from Winterfest. And before I forget to mention this, there will be no show with Dan tomorrow evening. And that is because of my family commitment. We've got a family event that night. So no show with Dan this week, but there will be one next week. And then the week after, I'll be at Winterfest. So I'm not sure that that's going to happen. But I'm not sure that it isn't. So we will definitely do a Monday show from Winterfest per usual, bandwidth permitting. But if I have ways to mitigate potential bandwidth problems. Let me put it that way. We may do like a day game and an evening game type of thing. If we do an evening game, it's probably going to be GTS Race for Bastogne. That is the current idea. Hopefully we can get this ironed out like literally in the next couple of days, because if we're doing GCACW, then I want to print out the unit cards and all that stuff, which in some cases means I need to make them, because the nobody's done unit cards for the new version yet that I've seen anyway. If somebody knows where those are at, they're not on BGG, let me know. So anyway, I've heard that this is very good, but I am not in a position to say. Anyway, I had some other stuff, and I didn't do an outline for tonight, so I guess we're seat of the pantsing it. That is okay. But games we like and why they suck anyway, right? Flaws in the game we like, game or games or systems or whatever you have. That we have kind of decided that we're just willing to put up with, right? No game is flawless. I think we can all generally agree with that. For no other reason than that the games that we play are not one-to-one models of anything, right? They are models that model the specific aspects that the designer was most interested in modeling. Are these two different colors? Is there a pink and a purple? These are very, very close together. Crap. So Patton's pretty good too. By the way, I need to watch Generation War. Actually, that has been highly recommended to me. Trying to catch. Already backed up on the chat here, folks. It's going to be one of those nights. All right, so I think we might be talking about London's burning from Avalon Hill rather than the Spitzer battle over Britain. London's burning is one that I don't have never owned and have never really looked at particularly closely. I feel like I've got 3, I think, Battle of Britain games at this point, and I'm feeling like that's enough. But hey, All right, we're back. That was a actual computer crash. So, oops. Uh, this number, Ed Holtzman, was not zero. I will tell you that. So, great stream. Yeah, great show. Great job. 6 minutes in, we crashed. Fabulous. That is fantastic. So, yeah, sorry about that. But that would have been a great time to roll the Noble Knight commercial. I don't think I got back in quite that fast, but maybe I should try to do that. Try to set something up so that something will play automatically if there is some kind of disconnect problem. So hopefully we're back now and everything is fine. So sorry about that, folks. We're struggling with Spectrum technology here. So. No, I'm actually caught up because I scrolled when I got back in. I scrolled directly to the bottom, Daniel McCord. But your sympathy is appreciated. So anyway, yeah. So there's a pink and a purple here. Woe to the poor people that have color vision issues. Let me tell you. So we have more people now than we were when I was online. So presumably that's fine. So yeah, we gotta also do some maintenance on this counter clipper because it is not razor sharp anymore. So anyway, so I have no idea where I was. So let's. This is nice. This is nice. This is a true insider right here, folks. Let me tell you. Is that pink or purple? For fuck's sake. I think it's pink. Vincenzo Beretta mentions Great War at Sea, Second World War at Sea. I think this is, whatever we decide we're going to pick, right? We're going to land on, there are some flaws to this game system. So what kind of flaws are we just willing to deal with, right? So let's I guess start with an easy example for me, which will be OCS, right? What problems does OCS have? Well, I mean, the one that everybody complains about is the way artillery works. I mean, there's also the factor where you've got to keep track of supply with points on the map, and some people don't like the accounting aspect of that. But that's more of a personal thing rather than I think like a legitimate flaw. Not liking that is a completely legitimate choice, but it's a choice, right? The counter, Tim Greenhaw, thanks for stopping by. OCS fat stacks. So for some people, I will not say that large stacks do not represent a handling problem in games that feature them. That is clearly correct. And at the same time, that doesn't really bother me too much, except in those occasions where the table gets knocked over, or there's some other major catastrophe like that, which obviously I have seen and which we've had actual videos about. So, Enrique Romero, thanks for stopping by. Miles Reedy, OCS. Yeah, OCS is the Operational Combat series from the Gamers and series designer Dean Essig, now published by Multiman Publishing. They are on game number 20 or 21, something like that. I forget what the exact number is, but it's an old series that's been around since the very early 90s, as I mentions. What the poop happened there? All right, so that was probably, I don't know, it's probably bandwidth, to be completely honest about it. Roger Hemseth mentions Vakdam Rhine. Artillery barrage is odds-based, so that the more combat strength in Hex makes it less likely for artillery to cause step losses. This is a great example of exactly what I was thinking of and perhaps did not necessarily articulate. In that this is obviously dumb, right? This is obviously a decision that got made. I forget who the designer was. Joe Balkowski, perhaps, of the original Vakdam Rhine. I rather like the way OCS handles this. And in this sense, in the sense of, all the complaints about the artillery aside, I like the fact that there's a stacking limit, but you're disincentivized from keeping every stack at the stacking limit because of the barrage rules, because you are going to take major unfavorable shifts if you get barraged. And you are, quote-unquote, overstacked, even though you're under the stacking limit, but you're over the limit of desirable stacking. So, in any event, Vincenzo Beretta says he hates any game where the fall of France is hard-coded. I mean, I would agree with that, but Vincenzo, do you mean games about France 1940, or do you mean games that include France in 1940, like, say, a strategic level World War II game? I mean, I would agree with you in either case, but I mean, obviously, that this is a major problem that I have with Fall of France, the Europa Fall of France. Actually, it feels like the game's just written so that it will play out the way it does, or that it won't play out historically at all, right? Apparently, the network hamsters are on strike of some kind. They're a little bunch of carrying little picket signs outside the door right now. I also agree with this. I think this is a hassle. I see why it's the way it is, right? Because there's like a lot of the system as designed has a lot of numbers associated with each unit, and there are too many numbers to fit on the fronts of the counters. Now, does that mean that the folks in charge should have streamlined the system in such a way so as to not necessitate flipping the counters over? I'd be inclined to think so. But fortunately, we are going to get multiple examples this year of Napoleonic games at similar, if not identical, scales that we can begin to examine and break these mechanics down. Not that the topic is in general new, right? We've been seeing Napoleonic games since the early 60s, if not before. We're talking, of course, there about Avalon Hill's Waterloo. I want to say that was early 60s. Tony Mammal asks, are you talking about game mechanics that leave a bad taste? How about physical reasons? I mean more about elements of a game that maybe don't make sense. And that's why I highlighted Roger's comment on Wacht am Rhein, where you have an artillery rule that might make sense in terms of making a game of it or making it work, but really just doesn't make sense at all. That's really what I'm talking about. I also have a hidden agenda here, folks, I gotta tell you. And that is to try to get people to think a little harder about why they like the games that they like, and be willing to acknowledge and identify the flaws in the games that they do like. I think that is a generally useful exercise for us as gamers. No, that's fine. Everything's fine. All right, classic. So Classic Axis and Allies starts in 1942, does it not? I can't speak to any of the other versions of Axis and Allies. So, Tim Eric Goebel mentions Empires and Alliance. I've heard good things about this. It's a Rob Bama design. My understanding is it's basically an updated take on Guns of August, which, hey, nothing wrong with that. Guns of August is a classic. It is a classic, right? Some people liked it. Some people thought it was pretty sloggy. I personally have some sympathy with the people that thought it was pretty sloggy. And I think it played more ahistorically than historically in most cases. It played historically for parts of the game, but it played ahistorically for larger parts of the game. We did see. I've identified some mice around here. Maybe the mice are warring with the hamsters. Yeah, but then you flip the counters over, and you use the underside of the counters to represent certain statuses too. So I think this Jeffrey Wesovich, no offense, but this smells to me like post hoc rationalization. I'm somewhat sympathetic to this. Don't get me wrong, because I think even really easy fog of war enhancing mechanisms like this can help to help to improve fog of war. And I'm not suggesting that this doesn't do that. I think it does. I just don't think this was the reason why it is the way it is. Alistair, Logie, so I'm going to actually agree with both of you on this, with Stigler and Alistair. Because from the outside, the different rule sets looks like a confusing mess. Once you have tried them and maybe had even tried one of them and then gotten maybe an explanation of what the different rule sets are really doing and why they're different, then I think it's a lot less confusing. So I'll agree with Alistair. I think it's not really an issue once you've looked at it closely enough that you can identify why you would want to run one rule set over another in a given situation. From the outside, if you haven't had that experience, it looks super confusing and super duper messy. 6 numbers is a lot. I think we'd have to say 6 numbers is kind of a lot of numbers to put on a counter. Not saying it's necessarily too many. I'm probably going to say that it approaches the maximum number of numbers that ought to be on a counter. Certainly, ASL people will disagree with that with their vehicle counters that have 75 different things on them. This can absolutely happen. If Germany gets stuffed in France in 1940, chances are pretty good the German player is going to concede. That's pretty good. Cardboard Conflicts, welcome back to the show. Predetermined leader changes in U.S. Civil War. Wish it was more like Warriors of God. So I have not looked at Warriors of God. However, what I will say is that I actually, if one reads the designer's notes in U.S. Civil War, and I think it's easy to agree with Mark Simonich's rationale for designing the game the way he designed it. However, that said, I would prefer to see, and I'm a bit shocked that nobody has done this, a dynamic leader system or call it a randomized leader system for that game. I think I could stand to play it either way. I like it the way it plays, but I'd kind of like to have the option of a leader system like that. Tim Greenhaw. So the answer to this is really no. Tim's asking if there's a Napoleon. This is asked a lot, by the way. If there's a Napoleonic game that has similar mechanics to GCACW, and I think the answer is not really. There are some. If somebody's got a closer example, I will be happy to investigate that. But what I'm thinking of at the moment is the Kevin Zucker Campaigns of Napoleon system, which is not particularly close to GCACW. There are some shared ideas there, but instead of kind of randomizing sort of the efficiency of maneuver, Campaigns of Napoleon puts in like a command point / attrition mechanic instead. That I don't understand well enough to really probably articulate, but it does not feel particularly similar. Let me put it that way. This can be. Let me check. So this is in general true, right? We just have to be we just have to be willing to deal with this, though. So this came up right in the conversation for Winterfest about what we were going to play next. And, I prefer to play... Doug, thanks for stopping by the way. I'd prefer to play... In a Civil War game in general, I'd prefer to play the Union. That's me. That means that I'd prefer to play the Union, and that's basically as far as I'm taking that statement for tonight. But, sometimes I end up playing the Confederates because somebody's got to be the bad guy or there's no game, right? So at some point, people have to be able to agree or they're going to go find a different game somewhere. I'm actually completely okay with this. I don't see any reason for anybody to get offended because I know a guy who won't play the Germans in a World War II game. I mean, that limits his options. But that's his choice, right? I'm not going to get mad at him for that. But it might mean that we don't end up playing a game because neither of us wants to play the Germans in that particular game. So, I mean, sure, but, I mean, Labatt is a bit of a unique situation in this regard in wargaming, but, again, to kind of reach outside of wargaming for just a moment for examples, we can find, say, people playing D&D that prefer older versions of the rules, okay? And in the case of D&D, we might be talking about older versions of the rules that are radically different from the current version of the rules. And I don't think that's a problem, but it may like it's not like a moral issue, right? But what it might be is a practicality issue where it becomes harder to organize games, right? That's a factor. Vincenzo Beretta, World of War changes rules every 6 months. Usually those rule changes are pretty minor, though. Every couple of years there'll be something significant, like the oil rules will change or something like that. But generally, those rules changes are just filling in little corners that came out in tournament play. I mean, I'm okay with this too. I just think this is a suboptimal situation. I think it is actually usable. All right, Perfidious Albion says Panzer Grenadier and Great War at Sea, Second World War at Sea has too many likely untested scenarios. That's obviously correct. Normandy, the Beginning of the End by Draco. Is this the Nico Escubi design? Is that the game I'm thinking of here? If France doesn't fall, it's Germany's problem. Yes, it's true, but the Germans might decide they don't want to play anymore, too. All right, Frank Davis mentions first few turns of Global War are hard-coded to... So this is the Ben Madison design from White Dog that is a pretty recent release. It looks like a modified States of Siege system, which is one reason I didn't buy it. And I don't have a particular beef with States of Siege. I just think if I'm going to play Global World War II, States of Siege is not where I'm at. So, Napoleonic Battles Library. I am not talking about the Library of Napoleonic Battles. I'm talking about campaigns of Napoleon. Library of Napoleonic... Let me get to Chad's comment here because we got some super chats I want to hit first. So Chad Kennedy, thank you so much for the support, much appreciated. Love GCACW. He thinks the retreat rules are rather ahistorical, with retreats being 2 to 6 miles. Brought this up on BGG. Your thoughts? So bear in mind that's kind of a whole day's worth of retreating, right? And they're not guaranteed to be 2 to 6 miles. They're guaranteed to be 2 hexes, right? Is the typical minimum. And then if the unit routes, it's 4 to 6. And what that really represents is everybody just breaks off and runs off in different directions. And maybe it would be a better rule would be for a routing unit to just be removed from the map and return in the next day or 2 days later or whatever. That might be a better rule. I think GCACW is really fertile ground for this, however, because there are some really kind of weird things about it. If taken literally, I think this retreat rule seems a bit fishy, right? Let me get to that in a moment while I thank John Stanley. John Stanley, thanks so much. Regarding the ACW, U.S. Grant could have been removed from command for being surprised and being unprepared at Shiloh. Okay, so I'm not sure which game system we're talking in relation to here. But certainly this is potentially true, sure. And in fact, Grant took a huge beating in the press for, he was drunk that morning, which is bullshit. But Grant took a huge beating in the press over Shiloh. And, a press which largely ignored what happened on the second day. They were caught pants down. And Grant's got to take the heat from that. An interesting book to look for, which you might be able to get for a couple dollars in Kindle format, is something called Conversations with President Grant. I think that's what it's called. And it's basically so after Grant is not president anymore, he goes on a world tour, and a reporter accompanies him and writes down a bunch of stuff that Grant said on this trip. And Grant talks to a lot of people who are really interesting. He talks to Bismarck, for example. He has extensive conversations with Bismarck. How fascinating is it to hear what kind of stuff Ulysses S. Grant talked to Otto von Bismarck about, right? There's a lot of good stuff in there. And he points out that one of the interesting things that he says is about Stonewall Jackson. And his point is that Jackson died before he could show how much he was growing as a commander, before he was really matched against a an opposing commander equal to him. And, it is something you can, I think, see reading about the Civil War. I'm doing a lot of Civil War right now. Is, as people learn, right? Sherman was involved right from the beginning, right at First Manassas, and did not perform spectacularly at First Manassas, or for that matter, certainly on the first day at Shiloh. Although, again, most of that is them being caught pants down. The degree of surprise that occurred on the first day of Shiloh is also overstated, and I think mostly in reference to those inaccurate things that were coming out of the press in the wake of the actual battle. Jeffrey Wesovich would like a GCACW operational game and a Napoleonic BCS Grand Tactical game. Well, that's a very interesting suggestion, Jeff Wesovich. Thank you so much. Let me put that. I think Stigler is talking specifically about Labatt, and he's not wrong to say that this is a confusing mess from the looking at it from the outside. That's totally right. There are reasons to prefer one Labatai system over the other, right? If you're playing at a convention, you might find that you want to use Premier because it's faster. It's just faster, right? There's a completely legitimate reason for that. All right, I'm trying to follow a conversational thread here. I guess we're giving up on that, and we're skipping back to the bottom. So I apologize if I've missed anybody's incredible comment, but I've missed your incredible comment because I'm otherwise going to get behind again. Alan Salazar, thank you so much. Looking forward to take on LGG, even though it's a rare experience. Yes. So this is Le Grand Guerre, the Azure Wish game that was recently acquired by me. I do hope to actually play it at some point, and I think the chances of that are pretty good. But it's such a new, and it's not a game for casuals. Okay, so it is going to take some time and effort. And I will probably watch a lot of Callendale video because I think he's about the only person who's done video on it. All right, Brian Salahor mentions, love Commands and Colors Ancients. As I like Commands and Colors Ancients. It's not my favorite Commands and Colors game. Napoleonics is. But don't like the reduced units fight at full strength. The unit that's fought hand-to-hand and suffered losses. Yeah, okay. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? This is a great example of a rule that maybe just doesn't quite make sense, even though you might like the game overall. And I like Commands and Colors in general, and Commands and Colors Ancients specifically. It's one of the ones I actually took the trouble to go buy. So once again, Alan Salazar, thanks so much for the support. It is much appreciated. And thanks, Vincenzo Beretta. Much appreciated. Get those sweet, sweet euros in here. Okay, so the book, Jonathan Dyer. So there's multiple versions of this book. There's the original, multi-volume book that was published, at the time. And then that was edited into an abridged version, in the 1900s. And that physical book, which is not available as far as I can tell in an electronic format, that physical book goes for more money than I was wanting to pay for it. There is an even more abridged, super ultra abridged version. That's the one I got, and that is called Conversations with General Grant. But we are talking about the same book. John Russell Young was the journalist. Remember when we had journalists? That was novel. Although, reading about press coverage of the American Civil War, it reminds one once again that the problems that we think we have with journalism now are not, in fact, new or unique to our generation. Joseph Syverson says he has an issue with making inherently small games have a larger than necessary footprint. For example, Storm Over Jerusalem. We're talking about Storm Over Jerusalem or Siege of Jerusalem? Because I feel like Storm Over Jerusalem it's one map. It's one map, right? I think it is. Now, if we're talking about Siege of Jerusalem, that's kind of a big game, and then maybe I understand the I don't want to say question, but the reservation here, because on the other hand, topic and our level of topical interest is really, really, really important, right? So, if I were like really gung-ho about Second Judean Revolt or whatever Judean Revolt that was, then I might be incredibly engaged in a huge monster game of Siege of Jerusalem, right? I'm not, so I would probably, if I was going to play a game on that subject, I would probably rather play something like Storm over Jerusalem. It suits my level of interest in the topic. Am I going to play a 4-map monster war game? This is, the clearest example I can think of off the top of my head. Am I going to play a 4-map monster war game on the Paris Commune? I suspect the answer is no. I might well want to play Fred Serval's Red Flag over Paris. It's a small footprint game, takes up hardly any space, hardly any time. It is commensurate with my level of interest in that topic. So the topic makes a the topic and how interested you are in the topic does make a difference. There's some truth. I'd have to put a little more thought into this, but I think Marty's got a good point here. You didn't just lose guys out of a phalanx and go about your day, though. If the phalanx started to fall apart, chances are it was going to fall apart catastrophically. So, Kyle Harris, all the cavalry is on the East Cavalry Field. I'd have to look at this, too. Gettysburg's not something I'm looking at right now, but I'd have to look at this too. Certainly Gettysburg will be a thing that we revisit sooner rather than later, just because it's Gettysburg, right? So, if nothing else, once the new GBACW game comes out, we'll probably want to play that again. So a lot of people really like Siege of Jerusalem, too, I'll point out. Presumably people more interested, and I'm pretty into Roman stuff, that's fine. I just, not that particularly. It feels like a large project game in a topic I'm unwilling to do a large project game on. Jeff Beeler says, we don't have the details to make a tactical 1870 Siege of Paris game interesting. That might be true, but that's not the point. Jason W says, there's a role-playing game a zombie role-playing game called All Flesh Must Be Eaten. And when I see the abbreviation for A Most Fearful Sacrifice, a lot of times I want to mix it up with that. This is probably a little bit overstated, but not 100% overstated either, right? So, but like I said, a lot of folks really like Siege of Jerusalem, and I'm not going to tell them they're wrong either. Oof. I have heard more people, so I would love for the GBOH version of Elysia to be the definitive version of this battle, because that's the one I've got. I have nevertheless heard more positive things about the Avalon Hill version rather than the GBOH version. And that may just be, it's from back in the day where there were fewer games and it was easier to play one game a million times, right? John Stanley, once again, thanks so much. One thing about Stonewall Jackson, he was the military lawyer, Full Employment Act. He had several cases pending at his death. I'd have to look into the background on this. Eric Goebel really enjoys Knock Paris, but hasn't seen anyone push far enough to achieve a close historical result. Maybe not a flaw, but it seems like the Germans would need everything going right to win. Maybe, but I think that's probably not a historical. I cannot speak to Knock Paris. It looks really good. Apparently, it's been pretty well received as well. I will mention that for quite a while, there has been a game in the works based on the 1914 Mike Resch system, that the three games that have been released by GMT: Twilight in the East, Offensiva Outrance, and Serbian Mus Sterbian. there's a 1916 Romania Prelude to Blitzkrieg, I believe is the title. And I don't know where that was in development. It's not Mike Resch doing it. It's a different designer using that system. But that game has apparently moved over to VUCA Simulations and the Knock Paris system rather than sticking with the Mike Resch system, which I've heard a lot of good things about. And that's actually one of the things that was on the potential itinerary for Winterfest, in the wake of Whiff Evaporating was 1914 Twilight in the East, which I'd love to play because it's been on the want to try list for a long time. That said, switching to that 10 days, having never played it before, having not really investigated it in quite a while, and not seriously when I was looking at it, I'd be reluctant to adopt something like that, like 10 days before a convention starts. Let me put it that way. So we're going with GCACW instead, which I'm very okay with. So Tim Zale says that Avalon Hills Elysia is better. And I've heard more people say that than the GBOH Elysia. Greg Grant loves BCS but hates the lack of artillery counters and fires abstraction. I really think that this is actually one of the reasons why the game system works as well as it does. Now, this said, I really want to see, because artillery is handled essentially identically to air power, at least in the older games in the series. So I really want to see what Carl has done with Valley of Tears in bringing a more detailed air system, because you have to have that for that topic, right? A more detailed air system to BCS. So I'm very curious to see how that works. Do I think there could maybe be a little bit more detail on the artillery? Maybe, but it's also not a game about artillery. Do you want discrete artillery units on the map that then fire, and then they flip over, and then you have to restock them, and or whatever? I mean, I think that was a completely reasonable decision to not do that. So this is whatever. I am not going to say anything about that. I don't wish that on anybody. Don't get me wrong, but I have nothing to say about that. Cal Harris says Lee basically had a range accident. If he survived, he would have arrested every subordinate. Jackson was crazy. As his men thought he was crazy, right? Even when they said, yes, this guy is brilliant, but he was also crazy. And remember that Jackson's performance was very irregular, right? Jackson performed very poorly on a number of occasions and brilliantly on a number of other occasions. So he was somewhat inconsistent. If he had lived, would he have evened that out a little bit? I'm not sure that he would have. I suspect that he was, in fact, crazy, and that he probably would have gotten crazier as time went on, and probably not become a smarter or better battlefield commander. And a number of examples exist. Sluggish performance at the beginning of the 7 Days campaign, for example, which is, that's another part, one of those American Civil War topics that I'd encourage people to read a little bit more about. Vidius Albion says it's fascinating how the Germans overcame the French during the Franco-Prussian War, despite having the French. Yeah, well, that's true, but particularly their artillery. They had better artillery in World War I too, and that didn't happen. So, Jeff Beeler mentions Amabel Holland mentioned that she designed in the possibility of not having to kill the dogs in Mrs. Chippy the cat in the game Endurance to ease players' emotions. Easing players' emotions is not a design characteristic I typically associate with Amabel, actually, and I have not looked at Endurance, however. It is supposed to be super grim. So I'm not sure where to put this particular counter. Well, screw it. I managed to get this for a reasonable price from a buddy. Ryan Huards. The question, so yes, but that's not all of it. The really kind of what I want to get at is game design features that we don't like or don't think make sense in games that otherwise are good, that we like to play and will continue to play. The question really is to what extent does a flaw completely ruin a game, right? And then to explore inside the space of flaws that don't completely break the game, right? And there's been a number of great examples. The very abstract artillery stuff which does create some ahistorical goofiness in BCS, for example. Not so much in Last Blitzkrieg, but in something like the Desert games, it kind of does. Let's see. Frank does not like the use of dummy counters unless they represent bad roads, heavy seas, or drug-induced firefights. It's very plausible I've missed a comment or two here, but when we say dummy counters, I think I'm interpreting this to refer to things like Fog of War, where you might have hidden stacks floating around, and some of those stacks may in fact be dummies. I kind of feel like this isn't the best approach to Fog of War, but I don't necessarily have a better one, because this is the one that kind of feels superficially like it's going to have the effect that you want, of the effect that says, hey, there's a column under so-and-so coming this, there's an enemy column coming this way, I better react to that. Turns out it's dummies, and you got some faulty intel. That tends not to feel great in a game, but it also tends not to happen that much in a game, because usually players telegraph what they're really doing, whether they have it hidden by trying to obfuscate with dummy counters or not. Cardboard Conflicts adopted a defensive overall philosophy after seeing Austro-Prussian War, assuming the Prussian small unit tactics was disorganized. Well, yeah, that's true. This is true too. And this is an issue that has come up in not so much in Europa, although I would say Europa designed around it in a pretty clumsy way. But certainly something we might see in OCS, where you've just got this huge number of depends on the game, but you may end up having a really large number of artillery units that end up functioning in many ways like dummy units might. And that can feel fairly unsatisfying. They will be pretty much paper thin in combat, but like if they're attacked, and you may or may not have the supply to actually use them. Marty mentions, look at the setup for Time for Trumpets versus Last Blitzkrieg, and tell me you want discrete artillery units on the map. I don't necessarily think it's a problem to have discrete artillery units. I just think it's a designer choice. I mean, at this point, we're talking about two different approaches to designing the same general thing, and I don't know that one is necessarily correct in an absolute sense versus the other being just complete garbage. I think this is just a designer decision. Now, do I really, really, really appreciate the sort of leanness that BCS brings to the table? Yes, absolutely. Trying to catch up here. Yeah, this is true. I mean, he was slow even getting there. While napping, battling while other people are fighting while Stonewall Jackson is napping. So this was one of those situations. Jeff Taylor thinks BCS gets it right, and again, I think this is just a choice, right? That whether so and so the designer thinks it's a great idea or not, or me versus the player, whether I like to see it or not. I rather like the way that East Front Series actually does artillery, and that does have discrete units. I have to sit there and micromanage all the artillery, but East Front Series is also not giving me 10 million artillery units, right? Which some OCS games really kind of do. Carl mentions BCS RD unit speed bumps, didn't want them used as such. Yeah, they may not even have functioned as speed bumps. I think it's completely reasonable to abstract them out. Now, again, do we maybe want something a little less abstract than just points that you throw into barrages? Maybe, but I think it totally works, and I think it's a completely legitimate decision. I don't think it is again, it might create some artifacts in certain situations, but I don't think it's a huge problem. Really? Cardboard Conflict says Men of Iron has too many DRMs. Man, have I got the game for you. we gotta get you sitting down to play Goss. Holy shit. John Stanley mentions that Jackson was happy marching quickly to launch a flank attack. Longstreet understood the value of pick and shovel. 1863 and beyond reward. Longstreet understood this before 1863, I'm going to point out. I feel like, I'm not an expert on this topic, so I'm more than happy to have people argue with me about it. I feel like Longstreet was a real visionary, and that has not traditionally been appreciated. One by folks in the North because he was after all a rebel, but also because he was one of the people that bore a huge brunt of the lost causers because he actually did the crazy thing of taking Lee at his word when Lee said this is all my fault. Longstreet agreed. So, and some people just couldn't handle that. Stigler says Men of Iron has too many battles that are hopelessly unbalanced. This is true, but I mean, I don't mind that as long as you know going in that a given battle is unbalanced. There are plenty of battles that aren't unbalanced. Jeff Taylor mentions Arty units on the map as Gauss. Yeah, but I also do feel like the artillery replenishment rules, I feel like the logistical overhead in Gauss could be easier to deal with in general, and this specifically. So there's that. Well, maybe we're looking at that shared area in the middle of the Venn diagram, and that's perfectly okay. I would venture to say that if somebody asks, if I ask Stigler, and I know what his answer, I think I know what his answer is going to be. If I ask Stigler what his favorite, well, let's ask Stigler actually. I assume you have a lot of positive things to say about GBACW, and I probably will agree with you on many of those things. What don't you like about GBACW? I'm going to keep doing that because I have GCACW on the head. So that's the question. We know that Stigler is a big fan of GBACW. We know that I am a big fan of OCS. What do we not like about those games? For OCS, there is the supply / artillery mechanic. A lot of people complain about this, and I think this is a real issue, although I think it is overstated almost all the time, where you can't afford to fire your artillery. That's bullshit. If you play a lot of OCS, you will find that there are occasions when you do in fact fire your artillery. You also need to be careful about just not shooting at absolutely everything, right? So legitimate beef, just overstated. That's a problem. The amount of downtime during OCS is, I think, a significant issue. And there is some interactivity in the turns, but not that much. And it is very easy to work around the interactivity in the turns, such that in a given 4-player OCS game, it is not uncommon or weird, and I've done it, to say, I'm done. That's the last of my combats. It's your turn. I'll be back in 2 hours. And you're back in 2 hours, and they're just finishing up with what they got up to. I think that's an issue, right? That amount of asynchronous downtime is a problem. All right, Aaron Dennis mentions Panzer Group Guderian has a rule that doubles the combat strength of armor and mech divisions, which all have the same component regimen stacked together. Yeah. But then that feels like too much to me. That feels very gamist to me. This is a good point, though. Aaron then follows up with, he sees people very vocal about their opposition to this concept. He thinks it works from the game. So that this is a legitimate thing to say, too, in that it might work. It might make the game work. And, in fact, it might end up having been necessary for the game. I would probably say that if you have something that's just obviously ridiculous but is needed to make the game work, that maybe the designer should have taken a step back and reimagined it. But then again, some of those games are classics and have been enduring classics for ages, and maybe we shouldn't discount that. right? Vince B says discrete RD units are the least of TFT's problems. Time for trumpets, we presume. Do I have... I'm done, by the way, with Norman Conquest. So we're going to put this away as we continue to chit-chat here. It is 9:03 p.m. So I am going to thank Richard, who just joined as a patron. Thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. The support is much appreciated. These are pink. I don't have any red guys in here. We will figure it out. I am going to... ooh, nice. The sniper is not one that I've looked at, though. Man-to-Man World War II. Plotted simultaneous movement. You think this is crazy? Take a look at Operation Crusader. Frank Chadwick's original Operation Crusader from GDW. Greg Grant gets that Dean Essig was going for a more maneuver-oriented system, but he does think that the counter-battery duel is such a key part of modern warfare that it should be featured in some way. I'll agree with this statement, and yet I think it works fine. I assume we're talking about BCS here. Well, you know, this was a thing that Jackson did from time to time, right? Jackson and his foot cavalry, right, were known to do, like, make absolutely insane time. I mean, he did that by marching his people to death, but, you know, Jackson was known for doing this. Where are the baggies? There we go. I think these are the baggies. So, all right, folks, we are going to, first of all, I didn't do this up front because I didn't take notes. I want to thank our show sponsor. The official sponsor of the Counterclipping Show is our friends at Noble Knight Games. So thank you, Noble Knight. Let's have a quick message from them.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world. Just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, once again, thank you, Noble Knight Games, and thank you, John Stanley. Mentions Longstreet became a Republican after the war. This is true, but I think that P.G. Beauregard didn't become a Republican and took a lot of crap from those same people as well. So, this is absolutely right. You literally can't use artillery all that often. Well, okay, so let me refine the statement just a little bit that Perfidious Albion has made. If your expectation is that you are going to more often than not be able to fire any given artillery unit in OCS, you are going to be really disappointed, because that is just not how it works. You will not have sufficient supply to be constantly firing all the artillery. There is a lot of artillery and positioning that and effective use of that artillery is a major thing that one needs to know to be good at OCS, right? So once again, thank you, John Stanley. All right, HUN644 New asks, would you rather have a rule in a game that is more historical but fiddly, or a rule that's easier to play but simplifies the history? I do think it depends on the game, okay? And I realize this is going to be a bit of a cheat of an answer. But if I am playing, say, Red Flag over Paris, then I am probably not really willing to deal with fiddly rules, right? I want a reasonably fast, smooth, streamlined experience. If, on the other hand, I am playing Campaign for North Africa, then I should expect fiddliness, right? So, you know, management of expectations, as always, is like super important, right? If one, you know, to the extent of saying, I don't want to play that because it looks too fiddly, that's fine, right? I'm not going to get mad about that. Why would anybody get mad about that? That's just somebody saying what the preferences are. This is true. I think the thing with that I have with that particular implementation of that particular rule is just that it feels like it's too much. It does strongly incentivize keeping those formations together, but there's also nothing on the counter other than the text itself that tells you what formations belong with what. That was just not a thing that was done in the mid-70s. Jeff Taylor mentions BCS is one of his favorite systems, but he dislikes some parts of the retreat mechanic. You just pick up the counter and move it 3 hexes. Well, it's not quite that simple. However, you do ignore things like rivers and zones of control and stuff like that. That is absolutely right. And that does feel weird sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels fine. But like if you have, let's say but then you're looking at the safe path mechanic, right? So normally, yes, a retreat is just you pick the unit up and move it back, and you just ignore anything in the way, unless it ends up in a Zoc at the end of the retreat. Then it's a problem. Then you lose a step. Or unless the unit has no safe path, in which case it's different depending on what kind of unit you're talking about. All right, so Stigler says it's spot on. It rewards the Germans. Okay, so yeah, again, I think like the rule is that numerically feels like too much. It makes sense in the sense of incentivizing this behavior, this fairly historical behavior on the part of the Germans. That makes sense. Vincenzo says that Panzer Grenadier, for all its flaws, shows the importance of artillery at that scale, something often forgotten. Maybe a revisit at some point to Panzer Grenadier is probably something that is going to happen, actually. As much as I've had negative things to say about it, they were kind enough to send me some stuff, so I might as well at least give it a whirl. Maybe I'll go run down Tony from Tony's Board Life, because he likes it. I believe this is correct. But bear in mind the amount of material that was available on Soviet Orders of Battle in the 70s, which is not much. So it was relatively easy to find, at least for like some Panzer divisions, Orders of Battle that reflected what was there. Much harder for Soviets at the time. And Stigler mentions that operational World War II, certainly East Front, it is almost above reproach. I mean, it's an absolute all-time classic, an enormously influential game, as I've pointed out a number of times. 1776 inspired Caesar's Legions. Mike Reed, thanks for stopping by. I need to play this. Mark Ruggiero sent me a copy of Caesar's Legions. It is something one does not see very often. Operational Ancients. So that makes it super duper interesting to me. And if it ends up looking inspired by 1776, I think I might be able to live with that. I don't necessarily expect it to be the last word on that topic either, though. Vincenzo apparently quotes Mark Herman here, where we say that SCS is a balance of low complexity, high graphics, and enough history to let you know where you are. I'm not sure what high graphics means. So there you go, John. I am happy to oblige. Right back on the... I've set up, pulled down, set up again, pulled down a couple of things recently. What is on the table behind me right now is On to Richmond 2. Not set up, but it is there, and I kind of wanted to, as it's one of the things that we're thinking about for Winterfest, I wanted to kind of give it a look and see what the operational situation looks like in that campaign as, say, compared to the Grant Takes Command campaign situation. All right, Aaron Dennis mentions that division integrity applied to U.S. and British armor in Cobra, which makes complete sense, right? I don't know about discounts. I don't have a discount for anybody, but I do have the affiliate link in the video description. So I guess I haven't actually mentioned this. I mentioned the affiliate link, but I will mention that the conceit here is that we are working our way in Noble Knight store credit towards obtaining a copy of Campaign for North Africa, the fabled Campaign for North Africa. And when we get there, now I'll point out that they don't have one in inventory right now, so we're waiting anyway, which is fine. I'm happy to let it pile up until the correct number is there. There's a target, which is an estimate of what it'll cost when it gets there, but when we get there and we obtain a copy of Campaign for North Africa, there will be some video on it. That video might be 15 minutes of saying, God, this sucks. I don't know what I was doing. I spent like $1,000 on this. That was dumb. But you'll get something on Campaign for North Africa. I haven't watched any of his Central Front stuff. I crap, what was it that he was doing recently that I did want to watch? And I don't remember what that was. He has done Le Grand Guerre, though, and, that's worth looking at. If nothing else, because nobody else has done video on that, but that's partly because nobody owns it. All right, I would agree that SCS is streamlined. I will say that there are certain SCS games that I really like, and other SCS games that I don't like. And it's kind of a weird thing because it's like inversely proportional to my interest in the topic, right? That sort of like really high level operational scale that you get in, say, a Mighty Endeavor. I like that game a lot. At the same time, you zoom into Normandy and you get the company scale Day of Days, and I strongly disliked that. I am all about a big, ridiculously overdone Normandy game. Cool. I just don't think that's the one. All right, we're checking up. I agree with this too. Callendale's, he's got his own thing. Man, I absolutely respect what Callendale does. Yeah, he gets rules wrong from time to time, but we all do. So I'm not going to go yell at him about that. He's got his own thing. He's got his own style. I respect what he's doing. Locking Zox. This is like this very. Remember that Zones of Control is a commercial war game thing that Charles Roberts came up with. I want to say in Tactics 2. So that's like it's a weird artifact, and I obviously we have to acknowledge that there's like quite soft Zocs, as you might find in a game like OCS. Well, Zocs in OCS are pretty soft unless you're retreating and DG'd. Or Truck. They're a bit harder in BCS to the extremely rigid locking Zocs in, say, Library of Napoleonic Battles, where you enter a zone of control, that's it. You're fighting, and it's mandatory attacks, too. So you're fighting it out, and the only way you're getting out of that zone of control is through a retreat. Or, on one side or the other. That feels... And that's just an artifact of where design was at back in the mid-'70s, right? And it feels weird. It's not the only thing that feels weird about that system, and that's something I'll have more thoughts on later. Marty mentions Last Gamble, or The Last Gamble. I think it's called The Last Gamble, from Danny Parker, the legendary designer of Battles for the Ardennes from SPI. This is going to be Danny's final word on the Bulge. Danny is one of the great Bulge designers, and I'm really looking forward to this particular game. The way that movement interacts with terrain, interacts with zones of control, and how retreats are handled looks very intricate in this game. I really want to get my hands on this. I have noticed that came up just like today or yesterday, where Nate from Wise Guy History is learning Goss video. He's unfortunately doing it with... I haven't watched the video yet. He's doing it with the intro scenario from Vakdam Ryan, I think, which is a good choice scenario-wise, but it's a bad choice rulebook-wise, so I hope he's using the new rules. So, there are people who feel like those rules were okay. I think they are rationalizing things after the fact, to be completely honest. Chet Bell got an email from Jack Daniels. Any thoughts on 10-year and 12-year whiskey? So, here's the thing with Jack Daniels. I don't have a particularly strong opinion of the standard expression of Jack Daniels. A lot of the specialized stuff that they do, the single barrel stuff and the ryes and limited editions and stuff like that, a lot of that's pretty good. So, based on depending on price, I wouldn't pay $1 million for anything from Jack Daniels, but based on the price, I might well be interested in checking that out. I just think they're like regular, standard, old number 7 or whatever it's called. I think it's tired and overpriced for what it is, that's all. But if you can get like the specialty releases, I'd investigate those. All right, Vincenzo says, one day you must finally sit down and read about the American Civil War so as to have the conclusion. I mean, so personally, I suspect this happens to a lot of wargamers, that where you kind of drift around in the topic space as you continue to play wargames, right? People will go through periods where they'll play exclusively World War II games, and certainly I'm not going to give up World War II games. That would be asinine. But I have found myself more interested, or my of waxing interest in American Civil War, particularly at the tactical and operational scales, more at the operational scale, but then you're looking at GCACW, but also at tactical, and Napoleonic, and it's the same deal. There's not that much operational Napoleonic. There's a decent number of games, but not a lot of like systems that you can like really leveraged to handle a lot of different campaigns. One of the only ones that really did that is the Zucker Campaigns of Napoleon system. This is different from the Library of Napoleonic Battles. This is the same system that was in Avalon Hill's Napoleon at Bay and the other versions of Napoleon at Bay, as well as 1809 from Victory Games, which is the one I'd personally like to play the most, but right now the table's full. So, all right, Greg Grant. Oh, nice. Eric Hansen is currently punching and organizing Red Strike using Cube for Me trays. I actually do have some Cube for Me trays, and I'll probably end up using them for... I might end up using them for Winter's Victory, to be honest about it. We'll see once we're able to get that happening. Marty, help me out here. Help me out here. I sent an email today. Mo from Mo's Game Table, thanks for stopping by. So Greg Grant mentions Winter's Victory. No, it's nice. Really, everything from New England Simulations is really nicely done. It's very traditional. In a way, it's like very traditional wargame presentation. It's hex and counter stuff. They're usually at least half-inch counters. The counters in Winter's Victory are a little bigger. I want to say they're 9/16. I think they're 9/16. But usually they're half-inch counters and hexagon maps and all that stuff. It's very traditional presentation. It's just extremely well done. So we got, there's a little bit of conversation in the wrap-up show from Saturday evening, which included as one of our guests, John Butterfield, who is designing his next game. I don't know about his next game, but his next game that's not from GMT at least is on Hell's Highway, which is the new version of the Victory Games Hell's Highway, and that's coming out from New England Simulations. So that is definitely worth keeping an eye on. SCS is extremely streamlined. This is what SCS is for, right? So anybody that says SCS is too simple and means by it means there's a value judgment in there is nuts, because that's what it's for. It's supposed to be easy. That's the literal point. On the other hand, Campaign for North Africa was supposed to be complicated. Now, is it too complicated to actually play? Many people felt that it was. And maybe they're even right. Vincenzo says that the quote from Mark Herman about SCS came from his review of the Yom Kippur game, which I have never played, or Yom Kippur. Are we talking about Larangaire here? It's Zoc. We say Zoc. We can abbreviate things like grown-ups. We're consenting adults. This is true, but depends. I don't know. Depends. I don't know that this really mitigates. I don't think that it strictly mitigates that. Let me put it that way. I mean, you might say it sounds stupid. I say this all the time. Doesn't mean I'm right. GWG Gaming with Garavalia, thanks for stopping by. You could pronounce anything however you like. We're from Ohio. Pronunciation is completely optional. So, that's it. I guess that's interesting. Because I probably have used Zone of Control, ZOC, and ZOC just in conversation above the game table. Probably all about equally, I would say. So, I have like actual challenges in my life. I am not about to get upset about this. Let me put it that way. I envy the person whose life is so uncomplicated and pure that they have to get upset by the use of an acronym. So there's some really neat things about the Cube for Me trays. I think. Okay, let me be. So I was first made. Well, I don't have one handy to flash around, but it doesn't matter. We all know what a GMT counter tray looks like. Okay. The first time I obtained any of those trays was not from GMT. It was from the gamers, back when the gamers were coming to conventions still. I forget whether that was Origins or Gen Con. It was probably Origins. So to me, those are gamers trays rather than GMT trays. Everybody calls them GMT trays, including myself now, because then people know what you're talking about. My understanding is that they're actually made by and or for Udo Grebe Games in Germany. And therefore, I think the iLao game from Sound of Drums has 2 counter trays in the box, and those are basically customized versions of the same Udo Grebe / GMT / the Gamers counter trays that we've been playing with for years at this point. These are relatively easy to get because you can get them through distribution because they're GMT. There's plenty of reasons to use them. They look reasonably acceptable. You can do good organization in them for many games. They are perfectly adequate. For those games that they are not adequate for, that's the reason why I have a whole video series about storage solutions, about different ways to... And I did a video on GMT counter trays, but there's plenty of videos on other ways to organize counters. The 3D printing route is definitely a way to go, but that doesn't do you any good if you are not in possession of a 3D printer. So the Cube for Me... So there's 4 places to get counter trays right now that are still making them. That is the GMT counter trays, or wherever they come from. The Counter Tray Ferry delivers them, I believe. You've got the Chessex trays, which I strongly dislike. You've got the Aegis trays from what used to be Flying Buffalo, and those are pretty nice. I like those better than the GMT trays, except that the lids are pretty finicky. The lids are a bit difficult to get on and off. Now, this is a problem also shared by the Cube for Me trays, who's the 4th manufacturer of counter storage solutions at this time. The lids can be a bit finicky to get off. However, they're also designed to like nest inside each other, so you don't necessarily need a lid for every tray. And they come in a variety of different configurations and sizes and depths, so you can do a lot with them that you just flatly cannot do with GMT counter trays. When I got Oceans of Fire from Mr. Mark Herman, I'm trying to remember if... No, they were in Chessex trays, and the box was about this thick. The counters were in Chessex. There's a lot of stuff in there. The counters were in Chessex trays. And bear in mind, there's like multiple maps and a big stack of paper and a lot of counters and some cards. So there's a lot in the box. I got everything into Cube for Me trays. That's actually the first game I did using Cube for Me trays, and I am pretty happy with the results. The godsend was that they have trays that don't take up the entire footprint of the box. So I was able to put the cards in there as well. And that is a huge challenge with a lot of games that come in 2-inch boxes or sometimes even smaller that have counters. So you want a counter tray and also some kind of deck of cards. Now, the DVG trays. I'll mention the deep dish trays. These are hard enough to get that I didn't think of them. There are 2 sources for deep dish counter trays. One is DVG and one is Lock and Load. Now, Lock and Load, to my knowledge, is only selling those counter trays in some kind of like ammo crate type thing where you get a box that contains 3 or 4 or whatever it is counter trays in the box. The Lock and Load trays are nice. They're basically identical to the GMT trays, except they're deeper. That's great for using them. The first deep dish trays that anybody tended to see was the ones from DVG, but unfortunately the lids on the DVG trays do not stay on the tray. That makes that tray worthy of the garbage can. So now it is possible, I'll be happy to accept, improved samples from DVG if they want to send me something, or a correction. Maybe they've fixed that, but the ones I have I don't have anymore. I threw them away. So Marty clarifies 9/16 counters for Winter's Victory. Bob Cometh. This is a fabulous question, and if we can get Mark Hinkle on, I'm going to ask him this question, because there is a little text at the top of the box that says Great Battles of the First Empire, or something like Grand Battles of the First Empire, which does imply a series, but doesn't say that, right? So I would be very interested in seeing a continuation of that. Now, I might play Winter's Victory and say I hate this. That's possible, but I'd be pretty surprised at this point if that turned out to be the case. So, all right. So Marty says there's a long-term plan to do more Napoleonic stuff with Winter's Victory system, but it won't be for several years. On Hell's Highway is next, which we've already mentioned. I mean, it's a one-man opera. It's not really accurate to say it's a one-man operation. The next game is going to be on Hell's Highway. That's John Butterfield's design, and Mark Hinkle's doing all the graphics and stuff. And other than the design, occasional other designer, it's a Mark Hinkle operation. And Jaws of Victory was brain cramping on the name of the designer from Jaws of Victory, but it was not Mark Hinkle. All right, Carl, thanks for stopping by. I, of course, agree with this, but part of the purest version of English is that we can pronounce everything however we want. So that is what we mean. That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Stigler. We're just happy when we're not embarrassed to live in Ohio on those rare occasions. So anyway, I mean, remember there's like a 6-page guide to acronyms in ASL. I think it's not quite as bad in Starfleet Battles, but it's certainly not something that is alien to that either. All right, we're trying to get caught up on the chat here. So Marty points out Chessex trays, the ones with the catapult lid. So these are better than the old ones in that they actually that lid is a hinged lid. It's a one-piece tray with the bottom and the top, and they're separated with this hinge. And the old ones, the hinge used to be really tight. So if you laid it flat, you would catapult your counters all over the place. The new ones do lay flatter, and they have kind of like a snap-in type of thing where you don't have to use paper clips to hold them together anymore. I still don't like those trays. I think they're the lids are hard to they're like hard. They don't come open anymore. That's for sure. They're hard to open without a lot of pop happening. This is the biggest problem with the Aegis trays too. All right, so Vince Ree bought a quote-unquote obscene number of Cube for Me trays, and they arrived from Poland in 11 days. Yeah, their shipping is not particularly expensive. It's quite reasonable, and the amount of time that it takes is pretty reasonable considering they're coming from Poland. So I feel like, I'm not sure if I said this out loud quite this way. I think the best place, let me put it differently. I think the best counter trays you can get right now that are like counter trays and not bead trays or something like that are the ones from Cube for Me. I think they are flatly better than the trays that anybody else is doing. And, they're not, the GMT trays are fine. For most games, the GMT trays are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. And they're a little bit cheaper than the Cube for Me trays, too. All right, so Mo says that the lock and load deep dish trays are sold only in the ammo crate with 3. They do lock unlike the GVG plays. So, all right. Richard Coker says they've stopped offering the ammo box sets. They might be back as part of Kickstarter campaigns. That could just be that they're out of them and haven't been able to reorder too. I don't know. Peter Perla Pratson has 5/8" counters with 2 maps, 2-minute turns. 50, 90 turn games. So we're looking at GCACW, and the Peninsula campaign game. There's scenarios where you don't have to quite dedicate quite this much time, but the campaign game is 112 turns, or as long as 112 turns. It can actually end as soon as turn 92 or something, but it's going to take a while. This doesn't scare me. Achilles mentions it once again. They're really. Well, I won't say there isn't an attempt. Let me put it that way. But there really isn't anything quite like this nowadays. So Milt Janoski designed Jaws of Victory. Thank you, Marty. I had forgotten the name had fled my brain. So it does. But remember, New England Simulations is not GMT and is not trying to be GMT. They're never going to be in a position where they're releasing 3 games a month, right? Sometimes GMT will do 5 or 6 games a month, depending on the month. That's just how it works out. They're going to do 1 game every couple of years, and they're going to really take their time on it. And I'm really okay with that, right? What, do I not have enough games to play today? Come on. So, there you go. The crankiest man in Wargame. I can't be too hard on him. He sent me the wire. So, all right. So, Vincenzo says that Wellington's Victory is the name of a piece by Beethoven for 2 orchestras and rifles as musical instruments. That'd be interesting to hear. I should talk to Ed about this. I actually sent Ed an email today, actually. So I will find out what the deal is on the Aegis trays. I think were considering doing a second size too, like a half size version. And that would be enormously beneficial. That's like the huge advantage of the Cube for Me trays is that there's different configurations that you can use to customize your setup for any given game. Trays that take up less than the whole box, and trays that are thinner, and all trays with 25 compartments instead of just 20, or trays with 16 compartments instead of 20. So it's really beneficial to have that sort of flexibility. So I'm all my ears are peeled for any news out of Ed and the folks at Aegis. So I sympathize with just don't have the time, that's for sure. This is true too, and I found that I feel like this has become more of a problem in recent years, actually. And that's annoying, and that's probably going to result in me ordering less GMT trays. So typically how I buy GMT trays is, when they're on sale, I order 20 of them, and usually that's enough to get me through about a year. I still have the 20 some of the 20 from a couple years ago, because then I got a 3D printer and suddenly needed a lot less GMT trays. And I find this to be completely true. Sometimes they just don't lock. And sometimes you can mix and match lids and trays, and that works, but that just pushes the problem down the line. It's very annoying. Stigler, you don't punch your games. Why do you even need trays? So Jeff Taylor bought Jaws of Victory WBC back in July. It's really nice. Now, it is the Victory in the West system, so you kind of got to be on board with the random strength chits and the extra counter management. But assuming you're okay with that, and in a big game too, right? It's a little different dealing with it there as opposed to, say, Patton's Third Army, where you've got 200 counters for the whole game. But assuming you're okay with that, it's really nice, and I'd really like to play it. Indeed, Adam Misnick, this is absolutely right. The half-sized Aegis, half-sized Cube for Me trays, or did Aegis actually release their half-sized trays? Because I was talking to them about that. I cannot answer this. I didn't feel like they were that expensive. Then again, maybe I'm not the person to ask, since they sent me some. So I want to say that there are 2 full height trays and a half height tray, and then 1 smaller tray. Maybe I should do a video on it. But I did need one of the half height tray, the thinner trays, and then one of the trays that doesn't take up the entire box. So no, I just haven't gotten to this. My wife we're approaching spring, and my wife is going to need little plant pots, so I'm going to need to get that working soon. So, Swankiest Nerd, thanks for stopping by. Currently playing GD42, outstanding. This was another one that was on our list of things that we talked about for Winterfest, was TCS something, and we felt like GD42 was the best candidate for that. I bid today, but did not win a copy of GD41, which is probably the last TCS game that I don't have that I still want. Aegis trays are about $5 a piece per meandering mic. I mean, that's a little high. I want to say with the lids, they're about $4 at Cube for me, but you can also not get the lids, and then they're cheaper because they nest together. And I did not do that with Oceans of Fire. I'll point that out. So, damn it, who was it? Was it Steve Dolges who managed to get the Third World War set into the ball in the box using the Cube for Me trays? A not inconsiderable feat at all. So, if you are curious about those trays, go check out, because Steve goes through all this. Check out Steve Dolge's video from a couple days ago on storing the Third World War. We are caught up to the chat. So that is cool. Sci-fi war games like Fifth Frontier War. Colin Flanagan, first of all, thanks for stopping by. I'm not sure what you're actually asking here. I have both of these games and have played both of them, and they are So the Dune is this particular Dune game, the one from Gale Force 9, is a new edition of the classic Avalon Hill Dune, which is a great game. Fifth Frontier War is neat. To approach Fifth Frontier War as a war gamer, as opposed to somebody with an interest in Traveler, I think you're going to end up in a position much like Callendale was in after he played it, which is this game sucks. If, on the other hand, you approach it from a Traveler perspective, I think it's really pretty cool. Not flawless, but I think it's really cool. I agree. I think Steve's got a great channel. I watch a lot of Steve's content. Understand, I'm subscribed to virtually everybody. I don't have the time to watch as many videos as I would like. But Steve's on my short list. Doug from the Tabletop's Edge is on my short list of things that I will almost certainly watch. Gilbert Collins is on my short list. Gilbert doesn't kill us with videos either. Callendale, sometimes releases 3 videos a day. I can't keep up with that. But Gilbert releases a video every couple of weeks, and it's usually not a million years long. So yeah, I mean, you can't watch everything, right? I went through and cleaned up the watch later lists. I had like 400 unwatched videos in the watch later list. And I'm like, man, I'm not going to watch this stuff. The best possible case here is that I will put one of these on and lay down and fall asleep, and I'll be playing all night. That's like the best case scenario. So I cleaned it up, and I'm trying to be a little better about managing that, just so I can manage what I'm watching and what I'm not. Bear in mind, I got 3 YouTube channels too, so not really 3 channels, but 3 accounts, right? This is fair, but every once in a while I'll go in and dump the whole thing too. Is it Dak? Yeah, this is what he's playing now. I'd be curious to see his coverage of that. And it's one of the rare games that he's covering where if he makes a rules mistake, I could be the one to identify that, too. So, Mark Hodgkinson, thanks for stopping by. So, in case I haven't mentioned it, go ahead and thumbs up the video if you haven't done so already. I've been a big fan of Gilbert for a long time. Gilbert has probably been responsible for spending some of my money, too, right, on various Civil War products. So there's that. He's the reason I picked up Gettysburg Lee's Greatest Gamble, which I then had to find online rules for, which are not easy to find, because the command magazine that I got him in, it has the map, has the magazine, has the counters, doesn't have the rule book. So, but I did manage to find it. There you go. Watch. I mean, Callendale's very stream of consciousness, so it's, you kind of got to be in the mood for it, but if I'm in the mood for it, I'm happy to watch what Enrico's doing. Also, it's got to be a game that I'm interested in, right? He has done the occasional random thing, too, that I'm just like, yeah, I'm not watching this. But he generally does. I mean, he's kind of the anti-Marco in this respect, in many ways, actually, in that Marco hardly ever does war games anymore. Marco Arnaudo. Or Marco Omnigamer now, where, Callendale has occasionally done non-war games, but mostly does war games, and where Marco's videos are kind of very tight and structured because he's like a professor, Callendale's are very long and rambling and stream of consciousness, and there's room for both, right? Now, I'm not telling you you've got to watch one or the other either. That is up to you to make that decision. So there you go. I would Stigler. I would totally watch this. I watch Stigler's videos, but he only does like 2 videos a year, so that's not really saying a whole lot. So, and a very nice conversation with Gilbert. Not the one on the show. That was nice too at Compass Expo. So, and I guess I've been a fan of his content for a long time. He doesn't do a lot of World War II stuff, which is, refreshing because the rest of us tend to do a lot of World War II stuff. Honestly, I don't know if I could get an entire show's worth of topic out of this. This is an interesting perspective. I think I'd rather play with the errata. I'd rather play with the latest edition of the rules, the latest thoughts, the designer's latest thinking on it. Meandering Mike, I wish if somebody knows which video this is, please let me know. So there's the Callendale shtick where Enrico turns the camera on, and he's behind the camera. He turns the camera on, so you just see like a table, maybe there's a game there, and then he walks around the table and sits down. There's a hilarious video where right at the beginning of the video, he like knocks the floor lamp over, and it goes out, and he's like, "Fuck! Which video is that?" Because I would love to find that. All right, so Tailwind. I'm going to assume this question comes for me. OCS Blitzkrieg Legend is, in my opinion, I'm not the world's greatest expert on either the topic or games on the topic, but it is the best game on the France 1940 campaign that I have played. I think it is extremely strong. It is also quite tight for an OCS game. I think it's like 13 or 18 turns or something like that. So you gotta get a lot done in a relatively limited amount of time. And all the pressure is on the Germans because the French have a huge army that if they can use correctly, they can really stuff the Germans in the face. But if the German player is proficient at OCS, they can win. So I think OCS Blitzkrieg Legend is outstanding, and I would further venture to say that it is now I haven't played Burma, bear that in mind, that it is probably the best non-East Front World War II non-East Front OCS game that I have played. I haven't played as many of the non-East Front ones, to be fair. I've never played DAC. I have played Sicily 2, Beyond the Rhine, and Reluctant Enemies. Those are the non-East Front games I've played. And Blitzkrieg Legend, and I think it's better than the rest of them. The rest of them are nothing wrong with the rest of them. Well, except Beyond the Rhine, there's some issues with that. But there's ways around the issues with that, too. Sicily and Sicily 2, I think, are both strong. But Blitzkrieg Legend is outstanding. Imagine SPI's Armada is a kind of a notorious stinker even back in the day. All right, Mark Hodgson says, if you like the Pacific War, I can recommend YouTube Hypo Hysterical History. I've never heard of that channel. If you like Pacific, like World War II in the Pacific, there's, I can't remember what it's called, because I only listened to a couple of the episodes, but I like the ones I listened to. There's a podcast about that. There's, of course, the rather famous Dan Carlin Supernova in the East thing, which I have also listened to, which is interestingly formatted. It's like, I will do this show on the East, the Pacific Theater. It will be 12 hours long in one shot. What? That's weird, but I've been doing this. For probably the last couple of years, I've been like going to sleep to videos until about the last 2 months, in which case I haven't. Unauthorized History of the Pacific War, Marty, is the podcast I am thinking of, in fact. So, and Doug points that out too, and so does Matt Davidson. So apparently everybody's listening to this. What I am listening, I guess I can talk about this. So I signed up for an Audible trial, without realizing that there are like 3 or 4 or 5 different levels of Audible subscriptions. Some of which give you a book credit every month or multiple book credits every month, and some of which don't. The one that doesn't, which was the one I signed up for, was... Now, you got a credit for signing up for the trial, but you don't get, like, one every month. You have to, like, upgrade to the $15 a month package for that. So I'm like, well, this is kind of the point. I was willing to pay for it, right? Because I listen to a lot of podcasts because of this hour and 45-minute commute, right? So, and yard work and all that stuff. I live on that, right? So I'm happy to pay for it. That's not the problem. But it's like, okay, so I'm paying $8 a month, but I'm getting access to just like this general pool of mostly generic shit. And they did have some good stuff there that was worth listening to. But then I went and looked at Spotify, which also has audiobooks. They had every audiobook that I had like access to through the Audible like lowest level trial, and some other stuff. And I'm already paying for Spotify, so fuck it, I'll do that, right? I have queued up a huge list of stuff to listen to. Right now I am listening to Battle Cry of Freedom. I've read the book before, but it's been a while, and it's worth revisiting. Where am I at right now? Jackson's Valley Campaign, 1862. So that's where I am. Bear in mind, that's like halfway through the book. McPherson doesn't get to the war for like 320 pages, so... We got that far. Rostov 41 is a pretty nice SCS game for those interested in the topic. USA-centric, sure, but I mean it's a podcast by Americans. I'd expect it to be. I mean, that's something to observe that it is a US-centric podcast. That is not a criticism. That's just a thing that, okay, you know, these are people doing a thing, and they have a point of view, and that's their point of view. And that's not necessarily an opinion that they are espousing. That's just, you know, kind of where they're coming from, right? Just acknowledge that. That's all. GWG Gaming with Garibaldi, binge watching Gettysburg videos. I had several... I kind of did like a multi-pronged assault on First Manassas, where I was listening to the Civil War and Reconstruction podcast, which has like an 8-episode series on First Manassas, while simultaneously also listening to that part of it which didn't take nearly as long, obviously, from Battle Cry of Freedom, and then setting up First Manassas in All Green Alike and playing through that. And that was very illustrative, and I feel like I understand the battle quite a bit better now than I did. Although, you know, there's still more to learn. I've got at least one book on Manassas too. Do I have this? I might have this. I'm not sure. I will also mention, hell, I'll even put this in the chat if I have it available at the moment. I do not. There is a BGG thread called something like Kindle Discount Deals or something like that. Kindle Military History Deals. And which time do we have? We got 10 minutes. So this is a great opportunity for me to do this, to wrap us up here. I am all about not bothering with physical media anymore. Okay. I would strongly, and I'm aware that there are concerns and risks and stuff like that where they're going to take it away from me, whatever. That hasn't happened yet to me. It has happened in a couple of instances. Just in terms of like the storage and management, I am generally speaking much happier to buy electronic media that I do not have to physically store anymore. That includes music, that includes movies, that includes games. Unfortunately, wargames are not something you can reasonably do that with. So we have not managed to do that. RPGs, on the other hand, you can. That does create issues if you are like playing physically or getting together in the same physical space as people, as opposed to doing it online. But I have avoided that question by sticking to Traveler and whatever Chaosium's doing for physical products, and then anything else that I'm that interested in, I will pick up electronically in PDF. So as a result, I have accumulated a lot of Kindle books on a variety of topics, including the occasional, like, genre fiction or whatever. But, did I just pick this up? I may have just picked this up, actually. I'm not going to look it up right now. There's a book called something like Retreat from Gettysburg or something like that. But so I've got like 100 Napoleonic books and like 120 Civil War books in electronic format. Now, they're not all great, okay? So sometimes you'll see this is cheap because it was written in 1870 and it's horrifically dry to read. There is a book called, I think, The French Revolution and Napoleon or something like that. My God, it was excruciating getting through this book. And it was exactly what this was. It's like a book written in like the 1840s. It was very difficult to read, but I did get through it. A lot like that Emerging Civil War series, I find those to be fairly superficial, but if you want like an introduction to a battle you don't have a lot of material about, then they're fine. I've got one on Cedar Mountain that I read that I was like, yeah, this was okay. This was, gave me some idea of what the battle was like. So generally speaking, man, I'm all for the electronic formats because I don't have to store them, right? I got this. All this space has to be saved for games, man. I don't have time to store CDs and movies and shit like that. I do have some physical media, some more today. Thank you, Stigler. But I don't have a lot of physical media anymore as far as music and movies. I've got probably 20 CDs, which I probably could get rid of. Mostly, there's some that I can't. Right, there's some like CDs by reenactment performers that I simply cannot replace. So I'm keeping those. So I will mention that anything by Dave Powell, who's primarily he's done a lot of stuff on Chickamauga. Anything by Dave Powell and some games on Chickamauga too. Any of those are really good. I can't speak to this. I can speak very highly of one of the, I think 2, maybe 3 books by John Keegan that I have read. The one that I could think of off the top of my head, which is sort of similar to this, is his book, The First World War, which is a 1-volume World War I book, and it's very good. So highly, highly recommended of that. For the American Civil War, I typically will send people to McPherson and Battle Cry of Freedom. But part of the reason for that is because I think it gives you a really well-rounded picture of the American Civil War. It gives you a lot of background on the causes, the economic foundations, the economic prosecution of the war. I just listened to a whole chapter where he talked about the Confederate and Union economies during the Civil War. That was great. Single volume history, I would agree. There's plenty of other books on the Civil War, right? I mean, I'll even send you to Shelby Foote. Just, understand Foote's got an opinion, and that's fine. It's fine. Just, recognize that he's got an opinion. I got this for Christmas. I mean, could you imagine? This is like 113 volumes, man. Can you imagine storing this? No. So, yes, I'm happy to have this on DVD. And that is research material for the future is what that's for. So, you can always take them to like a used place, like a half-price books or a record exchange or whatever, and if you just want to dump them. What I ended up doing years and years and years ago, I had about 200 CDs, something like 300, maybe 300 CDs, something like that. It wasn't an enormous collection, but it was not nothing either. I digitized them all. This was back in the day when I was using iTunes for this still, which was a mistake, but that aside. Yeah, but it's also nice to have them on a CD. So they're all organized and the files are all named already, and I don't have to do that. So Carl is the master of research and is, of course, the person who would know this. But that said, it was a Christmas gift that I am delighted to receive. So, I'm at the point where I got to have a separate optical drive for the computer because the computer does not come with an optical drive because computers do not come with optical drives anymore. for the most part, unless you custom build one, in which case go nuts. But you got to decide that you need that optical drive. I got a USB one, it's fine. But I see those Encyclopedia Britannica sets for sale all the time for like $150, which I'm sure is vastly less than they cost. The original foundation for the contents of Wikipedia, which has grown, at least 2 orders of magnitude since then, was like a 1910 or something like that release of the Encyclopedia Britannica. So, I'm all about the electronic media where possible, right? I mean, Wargames I can't do that with, obviously, but everything else, man, music, movies, whatever. I do still have some DVDs, but not a ton. But I'll buy it digitally through Amazon probably, and I'm completely fine with that. So there are people you can go. I know that Half Price Books does this from time to time, where you can buy like decorative books. You can buy like here's 2 feet of green books to put on your shelf for people who don't know what books are, but who would like to appear as though they are well read. You can buy decorative books to put on your bookshelves at home. I am not in need of this particular product, okay? Even not collecting 1 million physical books, I still have a decent number. I probably got this was all in the video, in the unboxing video, in the game room tour video. I probably have 12 or 15 maybe Civil War physical books, and maybe the slightly less than that Napoleonic books, and everything else is electronic, and I'm very happy to deal with that. Enrique Romero, thanks for stopping by. We are on the closing edge of the show here, folks, so I want to thank everybody for coming out. As previously mentioned, there will be no show with Dan tomorrow, thanks to a family event that I have to go to instead of being on the show with you fine people and Dan. So no show tomorrow, but we will have a show next week. And there should be an unboxing video this week as well, but it has not yet been prepared. So I don't know what it's going to be yet. Or has it been prepared? Hold on a second. Hold on. I'll tell you if there's an unboxing video coming out. And there might be. Is this the week where we have, yes, the latest issue of Strategy and Tactics will be the unboxing video this week. When we get the Winter's Victory done, I'm not waiting for Thursday. I'm just going to release it. So as soon as the editing occurs. Hopefully it won't require a lot of editing. The one with John Butterfield, yeah, a lot had to happen to make that video as functional as it was, and it was not that great. It was great having John on. That went great. Technical problems were all over the place with that. I will observe as a final anecdote that vinyl is outselling CDs now. I think that's not crazy. I think most people who might once have bought CDs are just getting it electronically. I haven't bought music in ages. I pay for Spotify. Fuck it. I can listen to whatever I want, right? Including podcasts and audiobooks or whatever. Right now that I got audiobooks, I got 30 audiobooks queued up, including Battle Cry of Freedom and Shelby Foot and a bunch of other Civil War stuff. As you know, plus the full Expanse series is on there. There's actually a lot of audiobooks on there, so I was pretty happy with that. Anyway, this is not an ad for Spotify. Who is not a show sponsor. Who is a show sponsor are the fine folks at Noble Knight Games. So check them out. Do check out the affiliate link in the video description. Once again, I haven't said this tonight. We are at, as of last reckoning, we were at 13% on the Campaign for North Africa. I'm sure it's going to be significantly higher when we get new numbers. I just haven't had those numbers in a little while. I'll only get those numbers roughly once a month. So, but we are working towards store credit. And if you buy something from Noble Knight through the affiliate link, and I'll also remind people that over $149 you get free shipping, that I get a little bit of a kickback from in store credit for that. So I want to thank everybody who has taken advantage of that opportunity. And I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We will have a show tomorrow. I may have the topic picked out for next week yet, but I got to verify that. Maybe not. I think it's the week after. So next week we're up in the air. But we will have some more videos this week. We will have some more videos as soon as they are available, but no show with Dan tomorrow. So once again, everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for supporting the show, which you are doing just by being here. Great conversation this evening. And everybody have a great rest of the week, and I will see you all next week.